Emily's voice came through the phone speaker low and confident the way she always sounded when she thought no one else was listening. Michael Lauren has no idea how long we've been adjusting the narrative around her contributions to the family gatherings. Every time she brings up that old argument from 2 years ago, we just remind her she was too emotional to remember it correctly. If she starts asking questions again, just gaslight her like we did last time. It works every time. This Labour Day at the property will be the perfect time to finalise the isolation. The family will see her as the problem. The surprise photo session is key. I'll make sure to point out her inconsistencies in front of everyone. She'll either stay silent like she always does or blow up and look crazy. Either way, we win. She owes us her silence anyway. We've been carrying her for years. Hi, my name is Lauren Bennett. I am 34 years old. I sat in my parked car on the gravel shoulder outside my parents' property in rural Missouri, the Labour Day weekend sun already hot on the windshield, even though it was only 9 in the morning. My thumb hovered over the stop button on the voice memo app, but I couldn't press it. The recording had been an accident. I'd meant to dictate a quick work note the night before while I unpacked in the guest room. I must have left the app running when I went downstairs for water. When I opened my phone this morning to check messages, the file was there 43 minutes long. I had listened to the first 12 minutes before I had to pull over because my hands were shaking too hard to drive the last half mile. Emily's words kept looping in my head. We've been adjusting the narrative. Gaslight her like we did last time. She owes us her silence. My best friend of 14 years and my boyfriend of 3 were sitting in the kitchen of the same house last night, casually planning how to make me look unstable in front of my own family this weekend, and they had been doing it for years. I deleted the memo, not because I wanted to pretend it hadn't happened, but because I needed to think before I did anything permanent. I was practical that way. Clear-headed, people used to say. The kind of person who made lists and followed through. But right now, my chest felt like it was being squeezed by something I couldn't name. I drove the rest of the way up the long gravel drive. The white farmhouse looked exactly like it always had porch swing American flag on the pole, my mother's hydrangeas still blooming late into the season. My older sister Amanda's minivan was already there. My cousin Brian's truck was parked by the barn. My Aunt Linda's sedan sat under the oak tree. Everyone had come in for the long weekend the way we always did. My mother had texted the group chat 2 weeks ago about a surprise family photo session she wanted to do while everyone was together. I had thought it sounded nice at the time. Now, the word surprise made my stomach turn. I parked next to Michael's car. He was sitting on the porch steps with a cup of coffee scrolling on his phone. When he saw me, he smiled the same warm smile he'd given me for 3 years. "Hey, you made it," he said, standing up. "Your mom's been asking where you were." I studied his face for half a second longer than usual. Same brown eyes, same easy posture. Nothing looked different. That was the part that scared me most. "Traffic was light," I said. My voice came out steady. I had always been good at steady. He leaned in to kiss me, and I let him. His lips felt exactly the same. I wondered how many times he had kissed me right after talking to Emily about how to make me doubt myself. Inside the house smelled like coffee and the cinnamon rolls my mother always made when everyone was home. My mother, Patricia, was at the stove. My father, David, was reading the paper at the kitchen table. Amanda was helping her 2 kids colour at the island. Brian was leaning against the counter, laughing at something my Aunt Linda had said. Emily was there too, sitting on a stool, looking completely at home. She waved when she saw me. "Lauren, finally, we were starting to think you got lost on the drive from St. Louis." I smiled back. It felt like stretching a muscle that had been cramped for hours. "Morning, everyone," I said. I set my bag down and accepted the cup of coffee my mother handed me. The normalcy of it was almost worse than the recording. They were all acting like this was just another Labour Day, and maybe for them it was. Only 3 people in this room knew it wasn't. Emily slid off the stool and came over to hug me. Her arms were warm and familiar. She smelled like the same vanilla lotion she'd used since college. "I'm so glad you're here," she said quietly, just for me. "This weekend is going to be good for you. I can tell you've been carrying a lot lately." The words were kind, the tone was kind, but after hearing the recording, they landed like small, precise cuts. Carrying a lot lately. Translation: you've been unstable lately. I wondered how many times she had said something like that to my family when I wasn't in the room. I pulled back from the hug and looked at her. Same Emily, same careful, concerned expression she had perfected over years of being the steady one, while I was apparently the one who needed managing. "Yeah," I said. "It's been a long few months." She squeezed my arm. "That's why I'm here. We've got you." I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. Later that morning, while everyone else was outside setting up chairs for the photo session my mother had planned, I went upstairs to the guest room to unpack properly. The room still had the same faded quilt on the bed, the same framed cross-stitch my grandmother had made that said, "Home is where the heart is." I opened the top drawer of the dresser to put away socks and felt something shift against the back. An old envelope, yellowed at the edges, wedged between the drawer and the frame. I pulled it out. My name was written on the front in my own handwriting from years ago. I didn't remember putting it there. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper dated 6 years earlier. It was a list I had made during one of the hard seasons after my grandmother died. The list was practical the way I always was, things the family needed to handle for the property, who was responsible for what notes about insurance and repairs. At the bottom, in Emily's handwriting, was a short addition. Lauren did the research on the roofers and coordinated the payments. She's better at this stuff than any of us. Make sure she knows we noticed. I stared at the note. 6 years ago, Emily had written that. She had seen what I contributed. She had wanted me to know I was valued. Somewhere between then and now, that version of her had been replaced by the woman on the recording who talked about adjusting the narrative and keeping me silent. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. My hands were steady again. I had always been steady when there was something concrete to hold on to. Downstairs, voices drifted in from the porch. My mother was directing everyone into position for the photos. The photographer Sophia Grant, a local woman my mother had hired, was setting up her tripod and giving gentle instructions. Emily was already posing with Michael, their heads close together as they laughed at something. Amanda was wrangling her kids. Brian and my Aunt Linda were joking with my father. I stepped outside and took my place at the end of the group the way I usually did. Emily immediately shifted, so she was between me and Michael. Lauren scooted in closer. My mother called, "You're going to be cut off." Emily laughed lightly. She's always drifting to the edge. Classic Lauren present, but not really here. A few people chuckled. It sounded affectionate. It landed like the recording. I stayed where I was. The photographer counted down. 3, 2, 1. Right as the shutter clicked, Emily turned her head slightly toward me and said, just loud enough for the people nearest us to hear, "Try not to look so checked out this time. It makes the rest of us look bad in the pictures." The words were soft. The smile stayed on her face for the camera. Only I felt the deliberate precision of them. I didn't react. I had learned not to react when she did things like that. Reacting was how she proved I was unstable. But inside, something small and final clicked into place. I had spent years staying silent because I thought keeping the peace was the responsible thing to do. I had let her rewrite old arguments, minimise my contributions, and position herself as the caring one who had to manage me. I had let Michael nod along because confronting it would have meant admitting I was willing to lose both of them. The note in my pocket felt heavy against my leg. I didn't owe them my silence anymore. But I also knew that speaking up this weekend in front of my family during the photo session my mother had planned as a happy memory would cost me something I couldn't get back. The version of my family that still felt safe. The version where I could come home and not have to watch every word. I had a choice, and I already knew which one I was going to make. The choice sat heavy in my chest as I stood there on the porch, the photographer still adjusting her camera for another shot. I slipped the old note deeper into my pocket and forced my feet to move toward the group, keeping my face neutral, the way I always had when things started to tilt. Sophia Grant, the photographer my mother had hired from town, counted us into position again. Everyone lean in a little. "Lauren, can you shift just to the left so we balance the frame?" I moved. Emily immediately stepped half an inch closer to Michael, her shoulder brushing his in a way that looked casual but felt deliberate. She smiled for the camera, the same warm, open smile she had worn in every group photo for years. "Perfect," Sophia said. The shutter clicked. Right after the shot, while everyone was still holding the pose, Emily turned her head toward me and spoke just loud enough for Amanda and my mother to hear. "You know, Lauren, if you keep standing so far back in every picture, people are going to start thinking you don't actually want to be part of this family anymore." Amanda laughed the easy laugh of someone who thought it was a joke. My mother smiled and shook her head like it was typical sisterly teasing, even though Emily wasn't my sister. Michael didn't say anything. He just kept looking straight ahead at the camera the way he always did when Emily made comments like that. I felt the words land exactly where she wanted them to, a small, precise cut dressed up as concern. I didn't answer. I had learned years ago that answering only gave her more material to work with. Sophia lowered the camera. "I think we got a few good ones. Let me check the screen and we can do one more round if anyone wants different groupings." People started drifting apart. My father and Brian headed toward the barn to check on something. Amanda corralled her kids toward the lemonade table my mother had set up. Emily stayed close to Michael, her hand resting lightly on his arm, while she talked to my Aunt Linda about some recipe. I walked back into the house to get a glass of water I didn't really need. The kitchen was quiet. I pulled out my phone and opened my email app. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight in a way that made breathing take effort. I started typing a message to Amanda. Not everything, just enough. I needed someone in the family to know what I had heard before the weekend got any worse. Amanda, I need to talk to you alone at some point this weekend. I accidentally recorded something last night between Emily and Michael. They were talking about gaslighting me and making the family see me as unstable. I know it sounds crazy, but I have the recording. I don't know what to do yet, but I can't keep pretending everything is fine. I read it over once. It was careful. It didn't accuse anyone outright. It just stated what had happened. I hit send. The confirmation screen popped up for half a second before I registered the name at the top. Not Amanda, Emily. I had sent it to Emily. My stomach dropped so fast I had to grip the edge of the counter. The sent confirmation sat there, bright and final. I opened the thread and stared at my own words staring back at me. There was no unsend button that would matter now. She had it. I closed the app and slid the phone into my pocket. For a moment, I just stood in the kitchen listening to the distant voices outside and the hum of the refrigerator. The old note in my pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric. Outside laughter rose from the porch. Emily's laugh, light and easy. Michael's lower voice answering her. My mother saying something about getting the grill started. Everything sounded normal. Everything had sounded normal for years while they adjusted the story around me. I walked back out onto the porch. Emily was still standing near Michael, but now she was looking at her phone. She read for a few seconds, then glanced up and met my eyes across the yard. The smile stayed on her face. It didn't reach her eyes. She excused herself from the group and walked toward me calm and unhurried. When she reached the bottom step, she stopped close enough that only I could hear her clearly. That was an interesting email, she said. Her voice was soft, almost kind. You sent it to the wrong person, Lauren, but maybe that's for the best. We can talk about it later, just the three of us. You, me and Michael, before anyone else gets the wrong idea. She didn't wait for an answer. She turned and walked back to the group, slipping her phone into her pocket like nothing had happened. Michael looked over at me for a second, then looked away. I stayed on the step. The sun was warm on my back. My older sister was helping her youngest with a plate of cookies. My father was laughing at something Brian said. My mother was arranging napkins like this was any other Labour Day. The note in my pocket felt heavier now. 6 years ago, Emily had written that I was good at handling things. Today she had read an email where I finally said out loud what they had been doing to me, and her first move was to make sure I stayed quiet about it. I had sent the truth to the one person who had spent years rewriting it, and she was already deciding what version everyone else would hear. The rest of the afternoon moved like a play everyone else had rehearsed, and I was only now realising I had never been given the script. Lunch happened on the long picnic tables under the oak tree. My mother passed potato salad and asked Emily how her new job was going. Emily answered with that easy warmth she had always used around my family, then added almost as an afterthought, Lauren's been so supportive through all my changes. I don't know what I would have done without her steadying influence these last few years. The words were kind on the surface. Underneath, they did exactly what the recording had promised they would do. They positioned her as the grateful one and me as the one who needed to be managed. Amanda nodded like it made perfect sense. My father smiled. Michael kept his eyes on his plate. I ate without tasting anything. Every time I opened my mouth to speak, Emily found a gentle way to redirect the conversation or soften whatever I said. Lauren's always been the intense one in our friendship, she told my Aunt Linda when I mentioned a work project I was proud of. It's one of the things I love about her, but sometimes she gets so wrapped up she forgets other people have their own stuff going on. Each sentence was a small, careful adjustment to the story. By the time we cleared the plates, I could feel the shift in the air around me. Not outright hostility, just a quiet, polite distance that hadn't been there when I arrived that morning. After lunch, I found Amanda alone by the barn, helping her oldest with a soccer ball. I asked if we could talk for a minute. She glanced toward the house where Emily and Michael were still sitting on the porch. Now's not great, she said. Emily already mentioned you've been under a lot of stress lately. She said you might be reading into things again. Maybe after the weekend when things calm down. She didn't say it unkindly. She said it like someone repeating something they had been told by a person they trusted. The reputation damage was already doing its work without me having to do anything dramatic. Emily had spent years being the calm, reasonable one. I had spent years being the one who stayed quiet to keep the peace. Now that quiet was being used as proof that I was the problem. I nodded and walked away before she could see how much the words had landed. That evening, after the sun went down and most of the family had gone inside to watch a movie, I asked Emily and Michael to step out onto the porch with me. The air had cooled, crickets filled the dark edges of the yard. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo, and played the first part of the recording without saying anything first. Emily listened with her head tilted, the same concerned expression she had worn all day. When it finished, she let out a small, sad laugh. "Oh, Lauren," she said, "that's from last night when Michael and I were talking about how worried we've been about you. You must have left your phone in the kitchen. We were trying to figure out how to bring it up without upsetting you. You've been so sensitive lately about anything that sounds like criticism." Michael nodded beside her. "We didn't want to make it worse. That's why we've been careful." I played the next section, the part where she said they had been adjusting the narrative for years. Emily's face didn't change. "See, that's exactly what I mean," she said. "You hear something out of context and your mind turns it into this big conspiracy. It's been happening more and more. That's why we've been trying to protect you from yourself a little. Not in a bad way, just gently." I took the old note out of my pocket and unfolded it, the one I had found in the dresser drawer. I handed it to her. "You wrote this 6 years ago," I said. "You said I was good at handling things. You wanted the family to know I had done the work. Now you're telling everyone I imagine things and need to be managed. Which version is real?" "Emily." She looked at the note for a long moment, then folded it neatly and gave it back. "That was a long time ago," she said. "People change. Priorities change. You've been struggling, and we've been trying to help in the way that actually works. Showing the family every little thing you misremember isn't helping anyone. It's just making you look unstable." Michael stayed silent, but he didn't contradict her. That was all the confirmation I needed. I put the phone and the note back in my pocket. The choice that had been sitting in my chest all day finally settled into something clear and cold. "I'm not staying the rest of the weekend," I said. "I'm driving back tonight. I won't make a scene in front of Mom and Dad, but I'm done pretending this is normal. I'm done staying silent so you two can keep rewriting everything that's ever happened between us." Emily's expression softened into something almost pitying. "Lauren, if you leave like this, it's only going to confirm what people are already starting to think. That you can't handle pressure, that you blow things out of proportion. Is that really the story you want them to have of you?" I looked at her, then at Michael, then at the dark shape of the farmhouse where my family was still inside, laughing at something on the television. "I don't owe either of you my silence anymore," I said. "And I don't owe them a version of me that makes everyone else comfortable. If that means I lose the easy version of family weekends, then that's the cost. I'm willing to pay it." I went inside, told my mother I had an early work call in the morning and needed to head back to St. Louis. She looked worried but didn't push. Amanda gave me a quick hug and said we would talk soon. My father walked me to the car and told me to drive safe. No one tried to stop me. No one asked what had happened on the porch. The story Emily had been building had already done its work. I was the one who couldn't handle things. I was the one who needed space. Leaving quietly only proved her point. I drove through the dark Missouri roads with the windows down, the night air steady against my face. Halfway back to St. Louis, I pulled over at a gas station and called my therapist, Dr. Elena Vargas. She answered even though it was late. I told her what had happened, short and factual, the way I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You didn't cause this by finally speaking. You only made it visible." I sat in the car for a long time after we hung up, watching the headlights on the highway. The old note was still in my pocket. I took it out and read it one more time under the dome light. Then I folded it and put it in the glove compartment. It was evidence of something that had existed once. It wasn't going to change what existed now. By the time I reached my apartment, the sky was starting to lighten. I unpacked only what I needed for work on Tuesday, left the rest of the weekend bag by the door, and sat on the edge of my bed. The quiet in the room felt different than the quiet on the porch. This quiet didn't require me to manage anyone else's story about me. I had walked away from the two people who had spent years making sure I stayed small enough to fit inside their version of events. I had walked away from the family gatherings that now required me to stay silent to keep the peace. The cost was real. The easy comfort of those weekends, the automatic belonging, the sense that I could show up and be understood without having to fight for the basic facts of my own life that was gone. I had chosen it to be gone. But the silence that had protected them for so long was gone too. I lay back on the bed without turning off the light. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the low constant pressure of having to translate myself into something easier for other people to carry. The feeling wasn't triumph. It was simpler than that. It was the absence of a weight I had stopped noticing because it had always been there. I had spent years believing that staying quiet was the responsible thing, the loving thing, the thing that kept everyone connected. It had only kept the people who benefited from my silence comfortable. I didn't owe them that anymore. I didn't owe anyone my silence when the price of it was erasing myself. The lesson sat in the quiet room with me, clear and unarguable. You owe no one your silence when that silence is the only thing keeping their version of the truth in place. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace in a relationship or a family and protecting your own reality, write, relate in the comments. What would you have done when the people closest to you started rewriting the story of who you are?